Let's go.
Boom. Okay, so we have a question from Kasha saying, I've heard a lot about the Te Papa Museum, but are there any other museums worth checking out? Thanks.
Alright, Kasha, so obviously you've heard a lot about the Te Papa Museum because it's definitely it's our favorite museum in New Zealand. It is the National Museum of New Zealand and there is really a lot of exhibition over there. It's a fantastic place to visit and actually also one of the best spots to get free Wi-Fi in the country. It's located in the capital of New Zealand, Wellington, on the bottom of the South Island, and it's
the bottom of the North
Island.
Island.
Bottom of North Island, yes, and it's an absolute must-do when traveling in New Zealand for sure. But yes, you are correct. There are plenty more museums in New Zealand to visit. And in fact, we do have a whole article on NZDT Pocket Guide, which is called the 10 best museums to visit in New Zealand. So we'll go over some of the ones that we really like on that list and we'll tell you a little bit more about them so you can pick something awesome to visit. So the first one we're going to be picking for you is the OTAGO Museum.
Yes, so the OTAGO Museum is awesome. First of all, because it's free. Second of all, because it is in the city of Dunedin, which is a very cool city to visit. And yeah, third of all, it's quite huge. There's actually quite a lot of fun stuff to see there. They have a whole sort of Polynesian history side of things. They even have a mummy from Egypt in there, which is kind of random. But yeah, they have lots of really interesting displays on there. And if you do want to pay a little bit, they also have a sort of tropical butterfly garden, a science center, and a planetarium. So there's a lot of really fun stuff to check out at the OTAGO Museum. That was a really good thing to do on a rainy day in Dunedin.
Now going for something extremely different, we're going to go to the OMAKA Aviation Heritage Centre, which is located in the town of OMAKA in the south end of New Zealand.
What more people probably will know the town of Blenheim, which is OMAKA's just outside of Blenheim. But yeah, the OMAKA Aviation Heritage Centre, or whichever way round that is said. This is a really cool display of World War I and World War II aircraft that is actually Sir Peter Jackson's private collection, or at least one of the exhibitions is. But what's really special about this museum is that the scenes have been sort of designed by actually the Weta Studios, which are a movie studios in New Zealand. They do really sort of realistic displays and scenes of real life situations that had happened during the World Wars. So it's not just your dusty old museum with a few relics to check out. It's actually really vivid sort of displays that are really impressive to see. So definitely would recommend that if you are traveling in Marlborough or Blenheim at the top of the South Island.
And I'm going to thank Natasha Rodriguez for joining us on Patreon. If you guys want to support the channel, you can join us on Patreon. It's absolutely awesome. And welcome, Natasha. We'll have a lot of fun together. All right, next museum, we have the Auckland War Memorial Museum, which probably is going to be more accessible than the one all the way in OMAKA.
Yes, so the Auckland War Memorial Museum it's an easy one to access if you're first arriving in New Zealand and you're arriving in Auckland, and it has some really fantastic displays about the Maori culture. It also talks about the history of New Zealand's social history. A lot of sort of you get to see what life was like in New Zealand throughout the ages. And they also do have because it is the War Memorial Museum, they do have some World War displays there as well. But just the one that maybe slight downside is that this isn't a free museum. OMAKA wasn't a free museum either. There is a small admission charge, but also for the Auckland Museum, there is an admission fee to go there as well, unless you are an Auckland resident.
All right, moving on to the Bill Richardson Transport Museum. We're going all the way to the bottom of the South Island in Invercargill.
Yes, if you do make it all the way down to the bottom of the South Island, then a must-do in Invercargill is the Bill Richardson Transport World. This is the largest collection of vintage vehicles in the Southern Hemisphere, and they have warehouse after warehouse of really beautifully restored vintage vehicles. So even if you're not really into vehicles, and if you're not a petrol head, basically, it's quite an impressive collection to have a look around. And we do have a video on this channel of us visiting Bill Richardson Transport World, so check out our video to see if it would be your sort of thing or not.
And if you don't go there for the cars, at least go there for the toilets. The toilets are like race car seat toilets. it's hilarious.
They have different themed toilets there. It's pretty cool.
All right, so moving on to the Canterbury Museum in the town of Christchurch.
Yes, so this is another free museum, so, you know, we always like that. So if you do find yourself on a rainy day in Christchurch, then head to the Canterbury Museum, which is right next to the beautiful Botanic Gardens. Again, it goes through the history of the Canterbury region of the South Island, going through the Maori history, the European history, and also its connections with Christchurch and Antarctic, because there's a lot of training that was happened for exploring the Antarctic that happened in Christchurch, so they have a lot of that history there as well. So that's always worth checking out. And one of the latest additions to the Canterbury Museum is basically a living room of someone's collection of power shells. And for those of you that don't know, power is just kind of like a type of seashell with a nice power. Yeah, so it's got a nice sort of shiny inside of this power shell, and somebody decorated their entire living room full of these shells, and now it is on display at the Canterbury Museum, so go check that out.
All right, if you want to learn a little bit more about the history of New Zealand, and especially the early colonial history of New Zealand, you can check out the Waitangi Treaty Grounds.
Absolutely, so this is in the Bay of Islands, just like a 2-minute drive north of Paihia, and
it's about 2 minutes.
Yeah. So the Waitangi Treaty Grounds has a few different aspects to it. It does have an actual museum with lots of interactive displays where you can learn about how New Zealand became a nation and how the Maori and the British sort of signed a treaty to make the country of New Zealand. But it also has a marae where they do cultural shows and show some sort of Maori dancing, that sort of thing. They also have a historical house there, a flagstaff, and they even have little bushwalks there as well.
Yes.
So the Waitangi Treaty Grounds has actually a ton to go and check out, and you could easily spend half a day seeing all the different things to do there. Again, we do have videos on the channel of us visiting, I think, actually all the museums we've mentioned so far. We do have videos for each of them, so check them out if you want to see what that museum experience is like for yourself.
Yeah, and what I like about the Waitangi Treaty Grounds visit over there is that it's actually super interactive, like technically, right? And obviously it's going to be a little bit controversial, but it's a museum about one piece of document, like one piece of paper, right? So it's kind of like, how do you really kind of do an exhibition around that? Obviously, that piece of paper has an incredibly huge historical significance for New Zealand and its foundation as a nation and all these kind of things, obviously. But like, they made it super interactive, so it's super interesting. And so even for younger children, they're still going to be interested in a subject which is, you know, it's kind of a dry subject. So it's really interesting, and you get all the sides of it as well, which I find really, really cool.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's a selection of some of our favorite museums in New Zealand right above my head. And in the description below, there is going to be a link to a list of our 10 favorite museums in New Zealand, so much more than what we just mentioned right here on NZ Pocket Guide. If you want thousands of travel tips and much more about New Zealand, you can check out nzpocketguide.com, and if you want to reward our hard work, you can hit like and subscribe. In the meantime, we'll go back to live chat because this video was recorded live. Boom, bam. Woo! What has happened in the live chat right now?